Getting rich can sometimes involve a degree of luck, but staying rich is almost always structure. What most people don't realise is wealth isn't lost because people do something stupid. It's lost because structure erodes. Staying rich is actually incredibly boring. So how millionaires get rich and stay rich? And let me start by saying something, that I've seen proven over the last 15 years or so. Getting rich can sometimes involve a degree of luck, but staying rich is almost always structure. And I've worked with high net worth individuals across different industries, with different personality types, across now different jurisdictions, different countries, and across multiple market cycles. And while how they have made their money can often look very different, how they keep it is remarkably similar and surprisingly boring. So today I want to walk through what I've learned, dealing with millionaires for over a decade now, and how they actually build wealth, and more importantly, how they keep it. And here's what 15 years of dealing with millionaires teaches you. Everything I'm about to share is grounded on real life experience, dealing with founders, business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are objectively highly successful. And they come from different backgrounds, have different stories, but the same patterns arise. And what most people don't realize is wealth isn't lost because people sometimes do something that is stupid, which can be the case. More so, it's lost because structure erodes over time, because discipline starts to slip, because complacency creeps in. And the people who stay wealthy understand that wealth is not a destination, it's a constant journey, and it's a system, a process that needs to be maintained. So one of the biggest misconceptions about wealthy people is that they're constantly doing something remarkable or extraordinary, and they're just not. Sadly, they are, from my experience anyway, boringly consistent, and that's definitely a term I use to describe myself, sadly. They show up when it's exciting as well as boring. They show up when it's repetitive. They show up when nobody's watching. They don't constantly change strategy, chase new ideas, reinvent themselves. So there's no new year, new me. But over time, that consistency, it compounds harder than talent ever could. And most people underestimate how powerful unsexy repetition really is, especially over decades. So the next point I want to make is, yes, wealthy people work hard, and in often cases they work harder than many. But the key point really, or the key difference even, is where they apply their effort. So the most successful people I know are ruthless with their focus. They're exceptionally good at saying no to things like distractions, the wrong people, the wrong opportunities, low leverage opportunities or business ventures, and things that don't align with their long-term goals. And they don't confuse activity with progress. They're not just busy idiots, as you'd call them. They constantly ask, does this compound? Does this matter? Is this in alignment with my long-term goals? And hard work without direction is what burns people out. But hard work applied to the right things is what builds wealth. So the next point I want to make, and a personal favourite of mine, is play the long game and let compounding do the heavy lifting for you. And this is one of the most important principles wealthy people understand that a lot of other people don't just get. They find the right thing to work on, or the right people to work on those things with, and then they double down, they commit deeply, they don't dabble. They stick with businesses, with investments, with relationships, with partnerships, not for months, but often for decades. And this is where the real returns often come from, where compounding doesn't just apply to money, because it also applies to things like trust, to reputation, to your skills, your network, your opportunities even. Most people break the effects almost of compounding by constantly changing direction. They lose focus, they chase the next kind of shiny object, so to speak. Wealthy individuals learn to protect compounding and keep focused on their one thing, or their a few really important things. They understand a simple truth. Big wealth is rarely created by doing something briefly. It's created by doing a few things exceptionally well over a long period of time. And this next point is super important, and something that aligns directly with what I do. The boring core portfolio. This is one thing you'll notice very quickly with people who stay rich. They have most of their wealth in boring investments. Typically 80-90% sits in a diversified core portfolio. That could be of stocks, property, bonds, private markets, whatever. And that structure quietly compounds over time. It's consistently boring, as we talked about earlier. And then and only then do they allow themselves to have satellite investments. This is where they have curiosity plays or opportunistic ideas or intellectual interests maybe. And what's really sad to see is, a lot of young, less experienced founders make the mistake of focusing on these satellite small investments early instead of building a core portfolio. The people I see who are the wealthiest and who stay wealthy, they crucially focus on having this core portfolio. They focus on consistently rebalancing, seeking professional advice, and they do it all with predefined rules. And why? Because calm beats trying to be clever, and they're not trying to beat the market. What they're trying to do is they're trying to stay wealthy in 20 years' time. They're trying to create or protect intergenerational wealth. So the next point I want to make is defense is what wins seasons. And what I mean by that is a lot of wealthy individuals that I deal with, that I know, the biggest difference between them and people who struggle to build their wealth or even protect it or keep it is they don't understand how to think defensively. They only think offensively. And this is really common actually with younger founders. As someone gains more experience, they tend to focus more on their defensive game. And this means proper cash buffers, the right insurance may be in place, the right legal team in place, clear understanding of liabilities, making sure they don't have any blind spots, no key risks personally or within their businesses. And they understand a simple truth. You don't lose the game by being cautious even. You lose it by suffering a catastrophic loss. And defense is what wins seasons. It's a common principle that Warren Buffett used to talk about in his partnership. And protecting your ability to stay in the game should always come first above acting offensively. So another common trait amongst the wealthy people I know or deal with is that tax is a system. It's not an afterthought for them. They don't obsess over tax. They also, though, never neglect it. And they understand, how to harvest allowances annually, how to take advantage of a certain release, how to take the right tax advice, understand the right structures, plan ahead rather than react. And they don't accidentally tip HMRC because of things like inaction or poor timing or missed allowances. Neglect is one of the most expensive mistakes I see, and tax efficiency isn't about being aggressive. It's more about being intentional with your actions. And this is where a lot of individuals go wrong. Right? The people who stay rich usually have the clearest definition of what is enough, what their future life should look like, what their financial freedom figure may be. And it doesn't mean they stop being ambitious or chasing certain milestones or goals. It means they understand when the game changes, when the game shifts, and they de-risk ahead of exits. They know how to separate capital from play money, so to speak. They know how to avoid letting a windfall re-risk their entire life. And I've seen people undo years of progress because they've taken bigger risks than they needed to when they've already won. And the wealthy know when to lock in freedom first. And this next point is what actually surprises a lot of people, because discipline actually creates freedom. And the most disciplined people I know are also surprisingly the most flexible, or can be should they want to be. So they have routines, they have structure, they have clear rules, and because of that they have greater control over their time, greater flexibility around their travel. They don't feel as chaotic or live as chaotic lives, and discipline doesn't restrict them. It actually to a degree liberates them, because structure removes things like decision fatigue, and routine removes friction. So what looks rigid from the outside often creates freedom underneath, whether it's in their personal life or their business. So the last and final point I want to make, and this is a pattern I see constantly, is the wealthy are constantly perpetual learners and have control over their environment. The most successful people I know are constantly learning, and they never stop. They're constantly curious. They invest heavily in themselves. They surround themselves with people who challenge them, and it often means you are made to feel like the dumbest person in the room. And something that happens to me on a frequent basis. They're intentional about their environment, and they protect their focus, their energy, their standards, their values. And it's because distraction is so expensive, especially in this day and age. But focus compounds. Okay, so let me leave you with this. And this is my final point and the key takeaway from this video. Getting rich often looks impressive on the outside, or it certainly can do, especially on social media. But staying rich is actually incredibly boring. But boring is powerful because it's structured, it's calm, it's disciplined, it's repeatable, and wealth isn't built in moments of excitement. You know, it's built through decades of consistency. It's boring, it's repeatable, and getting rich, although it can involve some degree of luck for some people, you know, staying rich has to be a daily choice.